Up next, we are going to be talking about several of the dimensions of culture as coined by social psychologist Gerard Hofstede. These dimensions attempt to describe the behavior of individuals within a culture, but it's important for us to note that while we are trying to describe those behaviors, we are doing so on a very general basis. We are looking at a culture as a whole, rather than looking at the actual actions that an individual may take. An individual within a culture may behave differently than the culture as a whole tends to. And that's really important to understand when discussing these dimensions. In addition, we look at these dimensions because they help us to understand intercultural communication and the miscommunications that might happen when individuals who come from different cultures and exist on different ends of these spectrums, we are exploring how that communication happens and what happens when someone who comes from one end of the spectrum versus another interact with one another. All of that being said, the first dimension that we are going to explore is power distance. The power distance dimension of culture explains the extent to which less powerful members within an organization or an institution accept and expect that power is distributed unequally. In other words, we are looking at those who are less powerful and their expectations about how power is distributed. And cultures may fall somewhere along the line of low power distance or high power distance. If we are looking at low power distance cultures, this means that individuals within this culture expect power to be distributed more or less equally, that everyone is on a level playing field and no one is necessarily significantly higher than another person in terms of power. So, in a low power distance culture, parents tend to treat children as equals, as humans in their own right. Additionally, older individuals within the culture are neither respected nor feared. They are simply seen as being a part of this culture and as making valuable contributions regardless of their elder status. Additionally, low power distance cultures tend to have more student-centered education, which recognizes that students have experiences that they bring into the classroom that could make valuable contributions to the discussions being had in that classroom. It doesn't assume that the teacher knows all. Additionally, subordinates, especially in the workplace, can be expected to be consulted by their superiors, by their managers. And the government is based on a majority vote, and power shifts hands based on that vote. So as you can see through all of these examples, we're looking at that level playing field that doesn't assume that an individual has more or less powers based on these various aspects. Now, in high power distance cultures, parents teach their children obedience, and children are expected to obey the rules of their parents. So parents are seen as having a higher power in that case. Older individuals are both respected and feared in these high power distance cultures because they have more experience and therefore are wiser than the rest of us. High power distance cultures also tend to have more teacher-centered education. So we're looking at Socratic lecturing and the sage on the stage type of teaching where the teacher is expected to know all and the students are expected to shut up and listen, essentially. And in these high power distance cultures, subordinates are told what to do by their superiors, by their managers, and they expect to be told what to do as well. And finally, high power distance cultures tend to have more autocratic governments, and changes in power happen by revolution rather than by election. That's not to say that all high power distance cultures are going to have autocratic governments. It's just to say that countries that tend to have autocratic governments tend to be more higher power distance. Now, looking at examples of cultures that fall into these categories or along these spectrums, countries on the higher end of this power distance tend to be Eastern European countries, Latin countries, Asian countries, and African countries. And on the lower end of the spectrum, we have more Germanic and English-speaking Western countries. So that's not to say that one is better than the other or anything like that, or that an Eastern European culture is automatically going to be super high power distance compared to an English-speaking Western culture. It's just to say that that's where these cultures tend to fall on those spectrums from high to low power distance.